more minute and then we'll get going. And I'll go ahead and share my screen. And then well, let's go ahead and get going. This is our agenda today. It's primarily focused on kind of making sure we're all on the same page on our assignment and the process, looking at kind of the table that we had created and seeing if we got kind of the big topic areas right, then kind of reviewing some of the resources and input that Jeff has shared with you, and finally talking about kind of preparation and expectations for the next meeting, which is, where we hope we'll do a fair amount of heavy lifting. There are some challenges, one in particular, timing of the, especially of the data center advisory committee recommendations, which won't come out until mid-September. So we'll have to think about how do we best address that. But anyway, that's the agenda for today. The timing, as we've talked about, we basically have between now and December 1st to get this whole thing wrapped up. We hope to have drafts of many, if not all of the, probably many of the recommendations for the September meeting. As I just said, because the data center advisory committee will be coming out after their recommendations will be coming out afterwards. We anticipate having to have some placeholder issues. We're still kind of finalizing what does that mean for public comment. The approach that we've taken with recommendations in the past is many of those kind of uplift recommendations or topics and issues and solutions that have been covered in other venues. So we don't want to recreate the wheel whole cloth, but there will be, I imagine, maybe a few recommendations that we wouldn't find in other reports and topics, or excuse me, venues. And then we're anticipating that the nature of the products that we'll be working on together in this group will be similar to those that we've had in the past, similar to the ones that were in the roadmap and our last report, where you kind of have a headline and then maybe some sub bullets underneath it of key elements related to that headline, and then a bit of a status and justification for why this is an important thing to do. So that's kind of the broad overview. We have scheduled, I believe, well, we're anticipating 3 to 4 meetings of this group, and some pre-work for each of the meetings with, as I said, probably a little more heavy lifting for our next meeting, and then possibly a little bit later in the process as we dig through the data center advisory committee products. So with that, I will stop and just see if there are any questions or comments. Maybe one other point, Vice Chair, after you mentioned in, I think, one of the last 2 meetings that we had, that, while we're kind of organizing on these groups, these topic areas, we may end up repackaging some of the specifics into cross topic recommendations, because I think that's a good point, and that's one of the main roles and responsibilities of the what we're calling the report committee, but they're kind of the synthesis and cross-cutting topics committee. So there may be some merging and repackaging of some of the recommendations from this group to tie into other areas of importance. With that, and I'm just going to be informal today, if that's okay. And just I'll call in. No, one more thing to say. These meetings are going to be public meetings. It doesn't look like, or at least I can't see that there's anybody other than our commissioners on today, but these are public meetings. We will not be taking public comment at these meetings, but they are public meetings. So the last two discussions, I think we've had members of the public that have joined. So just so you're aware, and then we'll be posting recordings and information from the meeting. So with that, John.
Thanks. Was our last report to the legislature in 2023? I'm just looking at the. Okay, 24. Yeah. Okay. So looking at the committee website, the reports, and oh yeah, the natural. Okay. Oh, and annual report. I missed that. It was great. Thank you. Sorry for the rather rudimentary question.
No, that's fine. Vice Chair Apter.
I'm sure we'll get into this a bit more, so I can also hold this if not, but I just had a thought to offer on some of the context you shared around timing of the data center advisory committee work, if now's a good time for that. Okay, great. Yeah, I appreciate you just laying out how that timing intersects with our timing for this report. And as we talked about, I believe on the report committee, or as part of the report committee kickoff conversation, I believe we will see initial findings from the committee, and actually they already reviewed those as part of the last meeting earlier this week on August 4th. That really, and as I understand, the next phase will really be a deeper level in terms of here's what we've heard, and here's the advisory committee's best attempt to compile those findings that will then inform their recommendations. And I think that will actually serve as a very, very helpful basis. And I don't think it's we should presume that I imagine there will be much alignment, if not potentially perfect, with what the advisory committee ends up recommending for the energy and climate and affordability related pieces of their final report. And I think there's just going to be a lot that we can take up and integrate and incorporate and use to inform our recommendations in the report before we, see those committee recommendations. So I just want to make sure that was clear. Yeah.
Yeah, and we also will be hearing a presentation from one of the co-chairs at our August meeting. So, to your point, Vice Chair, there's a lot of good information that was brought up, key issues, some potential solutions, but we really focused on the kind of key issues that I think we can get started with and make sure that we've got addressed in our draft set of recommendations at some level. But for I assume to some extent they might be a little bit like placeholders, some more than others. But thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, I thought the meeting on the 4th was really instructive, and in particular, there was a really good conversation. There were a lot of good conversations, but I thought the energy related discussion was good. Their greenhouse gas emission issues were brought up several times, and also opportunities to kind of look for ways to have data center demand play a positive role in helping us achieve other state goals. So anyway, just definitely worth they're long meetings, but definitely worth kind of taking a look at it if you get a chance. Any other questions or? Okay.
Maybe just one other quick thought. The 2024 report, I think, was completed before the Oregon energy strategy was completed. Is that correct? Because I think
Yes.
our specific task here around developing energy recommendations, feels like it ought to align as much, maybe help prioritize strategies in the strategy, as opposed to like, but I always have like lots of ideas, that may or may not be that worthwhile. But it seems to me like for our specific task of this subcommittee, kind of relying on what's in the strategy seems like a wise path.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to let's not reinvent the wheel. The energy strategy is a great example of, some really deep work that the Department of Energy did. And there's a lot of support for that strategy, and kind of, our job is to kind of look at what's most relevant to our mission as a commission, and where adding our voice could make a difference, what might be most relevant for especially the 2027 session, but the whole time before we make and do another report. So yeah, absolutely.
And am I sort of right in assuming the 2027 session is probably going to look a lot like the 2026 session, in the sense that like transportation is going to dominate, the budget woes will persist, or is that, or I don't know. I admit I don't track these issues too closely, but it seems like, I wonder if we should tailor our 'cause sometimes like policy type ideas maybe will have better traction in a year where like there's constraints around resources, because incentive programs are really important, but maybe they're less likely to actually be funded if there's they're making tough choices about social programs, for example, or education or whatever. So just wondering if anybody
Yeah,
has a sense for the vibes going into 2027.
I'll turn it over to you, Vice Chair, but before we go there, I mean, the big deal is that it's a long session. And so you have time to work with concepts, and maybe get a little further, so that's a big difference. But certainly we tried to kind of think about in what are the things that are going to be really top of mind and a focus during the legislative session. Transportation, this data center issue, I think will, some of the topics that we talked about at commission meetings that are likely to come up. But it maybe got a little bit of traction in the last couple of sessions, but might now be timely to move it over the threshold. But Vice Chair, do you want to give additional thoughts about that?
Sure. It is really important to remind ourselves it is a long session, and many of the bills that we did not see reintroduced last session in 2026 this year were strategically not reintroduced because it was a short session, and just because of all the other dynamics at play with legislature needing to respond to HR 1 and address the federal tax disconnect, among many other challenges. And so I think that particularly, on the heels of the Prosperity Council, and of course just affordability being top of mind, and ongoing budget woes, as you named, there will be a lot of continued conversation around innovative revenue solutions, and I think especially given the impacts that we're experiencing this summer, a lot of, in terms of wildfires, wildfire smoke, I think interest in continuing conversations around what are those innovative ways to fund community resilience, continue to sustain investments in successful programs like the rental heat pump program or the CREP program, et cetera. So I think, yeah, I mean, definitely budget and revenue. And Chair McDonald, you called out data centers. We just saw, the new polling, 2/3 of Oregonians support a temporary moratorium on data centers. Obviously, with the advisory committee work, inevitably that is going to continue to be a very hot topic next session. I really appreciate that Governor Kotek's executive orders, and specifically EO 2529, has really set in motion a number of interim processes that were, strategically assigned deadlines ahead of session, like the Odo clean energy reports that are slated to come out September 1st, that, will provide additional momentum for the conversations that we've always anticipated will need to continue coming out of 2025 around, transmission authority, but beyond that, addressing barriers to siting and permitting, land use modernization, which have become, I would say, more prominent, particularly after HR1 and all of the federal rollbacks and lack of incentives. What are we doing as a state to respond and keep those jobs and projects in Oregon? But also, again, Prosperity Council, a lot of conversation around how do we think about holistic economic growth? So anyway, all to say, seems like it's going to be a very busy session, lots of opportunity. And I think, yeah, transportation, obviously, like the legislature, whether they like it or not, we'll have to come back to that question. But I don't think it will be as prominent as we saw in 2025, if I were to.
And nor do you think like the affordability, issues, that are going to continue to dominate in terms of the energy sector?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's another one building off of 2025, the energy affordability package and the Power Act. Yeah. Okay. Chair McDonald's cutting us off.
Just a quick timeout, because this was a great segue to the next slide and topic. But I just want to, I don't know that we need to go through the charter. I think it was pretty straightforward, but if anybody had any questions about the charter, or can we just kind of go past that? Okay. All right. Well, then we'll go to the next thing and kind of. I have too many things open, don't I? So we looked at this. Well, first of all, we have 3 topic area committees, and then the synthesis and cross-cutting issues, or for short, the report committee. We had identified a number of issues and talked about those to some extent at our last meeting. So I'm sure there are things that, and some of the things that are here, or that you brought up, Vice Chair, after, are tucked down in the cross-cutting issues. As I mentioned, you had a good caution that we not worry about where we put things yet. We just think about what we want to make sure we say. And there may be things that we say in a couple different places. We may want to have something about how do we pay for climate action down in the cross-cutting issues, and maybe something more specific about transportation funding, as well, or merge those. So that's just something to kind of think about as we go through here. But these were the topics that we had put forward as potential topics for this group to address. So you said a lot. What is missing from this list, or from somebody else's list?
Chair, can you maybe zoom in a little bit on is it possible to zoom in on the energy section?
On the energy section? Yep. Is that better?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you so much.
And some of these are, even within a topic might get unpacked, or moved, like gets maybe better packaged with the transmission system. I don't know, but I don't think we again need to worry too much about how it's organized here, but just make sure we've got all the important topics.
Maybe it goes under energy affordability, but the thing that we can kind of tackle that like top down or bottom up, is something that occurs to me. And what I mean by that is like, we can address energy affordability through, all the kind of transmission reform and, the siting reform that's already been talked about a little bit. But to the extent that we can put tools into people's hands to reduce their energy consumption or produce their own energy, I think is a really important aspect of energy affordability that doesn't get talked about as such. And part of it too is just like, ratepayers have already paid for a grid, that we depend on already, right? And it's bought and paid for, and invested in continuously by the utilities on behalf of ratepayers, right? And I say that specifically because I think sometimes it's easy to lose sight of like these are private entities, but like really the private entities get the profit to maintain something on behalf of the people, and to the extent we can like avoid building more of a grid that is already built out, that's going to save ratepayers money. And that means better utilization of the infrastructure that we already pay for. And so I don't hear a lot of that discussion here in Oregon. It's certainly a very, very live discussion nationally about, better grid utilization. And part of that is these, there's been some good work already done in the state, VPPs and et cetera, but I'm just want us to not lose sight of and lose focus of that. So sometimes we say like, well, VPP, but that's just one tool in the suite of tools that are available to help us better utilize the grid we have, and restrain costs, and hopefully in that process give people the tools to manage the costs for themselves, whether that's a solar panel, a participation, a smart thermostat, or other things, bi-directional charging for your EV maybe one day, that kind of thing.
Are you thinking like specifically incentives to help people implement, or a broader set of?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have I guess if I were to think about like this a little bit more specifically, I'd be like, I think there's still more room around regulatory reform for solar installation. We've come a long way as a state in terms of making our state regulatory system friendlier for rooftop solar. But there's more. I think there's more space to go. For example, having adopting solar app or one of the cousins of solar app to make it easier to permit, faster to permit rooftop solar and battery energy storage systems is an example of what that could look like.
Vice Chair Apter, and I'm going to rescind my earlier statement. I think if people want to move things around, that would be helpful too. So feel free to provide any thoughts on what goes where.
You mean in terms of the list of themes and topics?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I was let's see, streamline permitting. Yeah, I think I appreciate the edit you're making right now. And I wondered, I was a little bit distracted by the final bullet of transmission system. It seems like there's a lot like just in one, and there's actually multiple topics here. It's like, yes, grid utilization, that might be its own piece. I think that fits into a lot of what Commissioner Botzatinsky was just speaking to in terms of like, there's many different solutions, right? There's a lot of community-based energy solutions like VPPs and distributed energy resources. There's progress we've made on microgrids, et cetera. And I think you asked a good question, Chair McDonald, around like, is that investments or incentives? I think there's a number of different tools, right? And I think it's part of what is so great about this report is the chance to say like, here's what we've done and here's where the gaps are. And I think being able to call out, right, we do have the community renewable energy program, CREP, that was created through HB 2021. Like, that's also chronically underfunded.
Yeah.
So like, let's not, we're not recreating the wheel, but really like, here's what we have out there and here's what continues to need attention and care and feeding. Transmission just, I think, needs to be its own. So thanks for separating that out. There was something else. Oh, I think this is, probably assumed through maybe energy strategy implementation, but just wanting to make sure that we're framing much of this within the context of HB 2021. And, we won't be able to do, I imagine, like a comprehensive assessment in terms of where are we with implementing that law, but just a reminder to the legislature, why, in terms of what led the 2021 legislature to pass that law, recognizing the benefits that come with that transition and clean energy as the backbone to our clean energy future, et cetera, et cetera. And also just here are the barriers that exist. And that's where, the energy strategy, of course, is focused in terms of how do we address those and get back on track. And there's also, there are pieces within that aren't, it does call out the data center impacts, but if I'm channeling, I thought maybe Commissioner Sheeran joined us, channeling Commissioner Sheeran on like wildfire impacts and utility liability and just some of that framing. I'll pause there. There was something else I was thinking about, but this is quite a lengthy list. So.
And, one of the, when we did the roadmap, the fact that HB 2021 and the CPP were such big, substantial chunks of the forecast and the reduction we hope to see over time. We, I think, prioritized in the roadmap and in the 2024 report that we need to do everything we can do to make those programs successful. So both kind of things that are kind of within those two programs, but also things that would be complementary. And, transmission obviously was one of those things that, is a little bit like you need that to get the other things you need. The regional markets, I think, as well.
I wonder if.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I wonder like if energy strategy implementation is like because it falls across, each of the subcommittees. I wonder if as we kind of develop specific recommendations that we tie them back to specific strategies in the plan, in the energy strategy, because for example, what Vice Chair Apter was saying in terms of the wildfire liability, that is a strategy, in the plan. And a lot of the strategies are fairly general, so we might have kind of a specific aspect of a strategy that we think, is ripe for legislating, but we can still tie it back to say like, energy 2 or something like that, and say like this falls into that category.
Yeah,
so
it's a great,
just a thought.
It's a great point. And one of the things that came up in our transportation committee was, you put like a word or two down and that doesn't really tell you what the scope of it is. So I think what we want to try and do is add a paragraph description and or sub bullets of what the subtopics are that, before our next meeting, and then we can kind of sort through those and see, which ones are the most important ones, or, dig into all of them where they might all be super important. I know that wildfire impacts as it relates to utility liability is has lots of sides to it, and is important. And I think we heard from Representative Marsh that I can't remember if it came up in our commission meeting or in conversations that I had with her, but it's impacting other kinds of investments that that is impacting other investments utilities can make and or are considering, just due to that liability issue. So, important topic. Vice Chair After.
Yeah, I think just, we're calling out, this is a long list. We'll obviously need to prioritize. And I wanted to offer, I think there is there are a few things, including wildfire utility liability, that we will have to have placeholders for because of other work underway, including the PUC study that won't be out in time. And I was similarly thinking of that for when we were talking about BPPs. There's a few different conversations underway at the PUC through their EO 2529 implementation proceeding. That's UM 2417. And those also, actually, I think the timing of that might work out a little better because the final staff report, I believe, is due next month. But those will be, I think it's that might help. That might be a lens for our prioritization, right? Like, let's not spend a ton of time looking into wildfire utility liability. The PUC is, spending a lot of time on that. Again, I'm sure Commissioner Sharon will have a lot to add there as well. But yeah, VPPs, again, I'm both calling out some of these timing components and resources that we're on the cusp of being able to leverage and incorporate. But also, I think going back to maybe what you were getting at, Commissioner Bostatinsky, in terms of this is a report to the legislature, but there's also work underway, particularly in the PUC space, or as it relates to the energy work, that's important to call out and recognize will have implications for our recommendations, if that makes sense. Yeah, and VPP is one in particular with that proceeding that I think we'll want to think about waiting for, maybe.
And some might not be ready when we have to go to press. We have in the past, although not as great, but it's an important. I mean, it's better than not even addressing it, is to be to be able to say support implementation of key recommendations in the work that's being done here and due to be done on X date. So we'll be able to go farther where we have good things to pull out of, for example, the energy strategy and some of the other things we were just talking about. But it's also okay for us to kind of make sure we're highlighting other things that are coming that are going to be really important. And because this, if we can't get there, it's still important for us to say this work is going on, and we know they're going to be coming up with a lot of good ideas, and then we can always do a follow-up in some way, opining on the work that other groups are doing. And we don't have to just confine all of our information to one document at one point in time in a biennium, but ideally we get as much as we can into this report. as specifically as possible. Are there other topics or other changes to the way we've organized or stated things that would be important to kind of clarify? Okay. Seeing any other ones?
Sorry,
Oh, great.
one more.
Nice here.
I don't know if I'm seeing citing called out anywhere or land use. I see the permitting piece, but
Yeah,
I think sometimes those get conflated, and I think the conversation would be broader. And just want to again uplift like the DLCD report that was finalized last month from the executive order, and then the 2 corresponding ODA reports next month. And maybe that could all be, I think it's fine to keep it under one, maybe Chair McDonald. I know we're not wordsmithing or getting it perfect right now, but accelerating development of renewables and, large scale renewables and transmission, including through siting permitting and land use reform considerations or something like that.
sorry. Okay. Was that kind of get at what you were hoping to see?
Great. Yeah.
No, it's not quite there yet, but as you said, we're not really wordsmithing, but good to get things kind of grouped and organized. And you were referencing the Power Act. Are there elements that were missed in the Power Act or complementary policies that should be thought of given that we've got that good base?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. But I think we have that covered here through the data center
Got it.
growth and associated impacts. But I do think that sets a really strong foundation for the type, both, what we hope to come next, but also I think where I would expect and hope us to focus our recommendations in terms of affordability, grid impacts, and ensuring that data center growth does not, hinder our ability to achieve our HB 2021 requirements.
I think these fit under the data center growth, but they also might be kind of cross-cutting issues, just the differences between IOUs and COUs, and are there things that need to be thought of that way? Transparency, reporting needs. I don't know if there are any of those things that might be helpful to additions to that topic, or just broader discussion.
Chair McDonald, are you wondering whether we should call out some of those specifics in the summary here? Or
I guess I was asking, are there issues that may not just be like, for example, data center growth issues? One of the discussions that group has been having is, the need for some more transparency to know what data centers are being are purchasing. Is that a topic that fits wholly under that bullet, or is it a broader topic? Are there kind of other transparency issues that we should be thinking about? Does that make any sense?
It does. I think There very well might be. I think there's a lot to unpack or cover, even like just within like focusing on the intersections between those issues and the data center topic. So no, nothing's personally jumping out to me as deserving a standalone topic other than what we have here currently.
This kind of seems like a jumble to me.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I assume that regional markets might be something that could stand on its own. I kind of feel like maybe I'm definitely not as close to this as others are, but should Gets be kind of under that as part of that bullet, or is it transmission system?
I mean, part of like VP, well, is Gets like green energy technologies or grid enhancing technologies?
The latter.
Sorry, I'm at the latter. Okay, because I'm in the municipal space. We have a green energy technology requirement for new buildings, so that's where my Gets brain goes. The VPP one, one of the recommendations in the energy strategy is sort of like market reform and to increase competition and therefore hold down prices. And that both to me speaks to regional markets, integration with regional markets, which is happening, by the utilities, but also like, VPP providers. It could be the utility, or it could be, in other states they have other systems. So for example, there's a company called Base Power that operates in Texas right now. Obviously, ERCOT's a very different system from the IOU vertically integrated system we have here. But there you sign up for Base Power. They bring a battery to your home. They put the battery in under normal conditions. You're just buying you're buying metered power from them, and they're deploying the battery that sits at your house, as as part of a big VPP. They're doing energy arbitrage, grid enhancing service, like frequency modulation, all the stuff that batteries can do, and selling that into the market. And then they also have a revenue stream from residential customers, which is sort of like maybe a smaller component of it. And then you get this big honking battery that kind of looks like a heat pump to provide backup energy in case of a grid outage. That what that would look like here is like maybe a tiny pilot. You know what I mean? Like because the incentive, the market structures just don't really incentivize that kind of competition. And so I think reasonable people, like there's probably benefits and drawbacks to the competition, but like until we have like the like some kind of incentive for it, and the VPPs are going to, I think, sort of stay in a state that like is maybe like unsatisfactory to us, until something changes, regulatorily. Is my personal feeling on it. But I'm not sure, Vice Chair Apter has, but like a more sophisticated view on it.
And just before you jump in, I recognize I'm making this messier rather in some places, but I just thought we'd maybe by pulling some of it apart, we could kind of see, like, do we really need this or this? And
I think we can drop I mean, energy planning is so like maybe we have to. It's funny because in Texas, it's like they're just like, go ahead, plug it in, whether it's generation or load, plug it in, and you know what, we might cut you off if you don't, if we need to, but have at. And so like it's just such a different, I mean, so we could take that approach, and probably people won't like it that much, but they have done some interesting planning there. Like they in the 90s were like, hey, this is the best place to build wind. We'll build a big transmission line. We'll have wind, and it really worked. And they have a ton of wind.
Vice Chair Apter.
Yeah, I support deleting what you just deleted. I was just going to suggest, I think VPP, originally I was going to suggest separating out VPP and Gets, but I actually think they can stay together, and maybe we just combine them with grid utilization, since I think that's the bigger topic that we're trying to get at, right? We have transmission. I originally suggested taking transmission away from VPP and GETS. I did that in part because I think there's two pieces of this. They both relate to transmission utilization, but one is like we need to build more transmission infrastructure, and the other is how do we get more out of the grid that we have and become more efficient. And so, yeah, I feel like VPP, maybe this is what you were getting at, could be broadened. It's one tool as part of how do we accelerate distributed energy resources. And I think that's a big part of what, the legislation that has been introduced is focused on in terms of like expanding the market and supporting third-party aggregators and really building on what is currently more of a pilot model within the PUC utility space.
And I think that
this
to
looks
some
good.
extent, like, yeah, DERs and sort of DER like permitting reform can also be lumped in there, right? Because like the nice thing about rooftop solar is that like you're generating energy right where it's being used, and therefore you don't have to transport it, far distances.
How can I capture? How can I best
so I think we have it there. We have the barriers, needs. I think accelerating development of renewable energy. We have streamlining permitting for renewable development for renewables development, and I wonder. I mean, what my intention behind that was sort of like more specific, rooftop solar and battery and residential battery deployment, as opposed to, a more general, utility scale, distribution model, which is also great and needed and wonderful, but and then I don't know, maybe maybe this is too far afield, but one issue that really has an interesting level of alignment in the energy space are these thermal energy networks, that are not quite like hot geothermal, but like these pipes that share energy, and you do heat exchangers, and it's like built out in like a few city blocks or something like that. When I was doing our climate justice plan groups, you had like the gas company, the unions, and the environmentalists all agreeing that they just love these things. So I was like, well, geez, guys, we should really work on this together, because it seems like an area where we all agree, which is maybe the first time ever. And so what I've heard, I think Massachusetts, for example, has and again, maybe this is doesn't get done this session, but maybe next session, like Massachusetts has like these and maybe it can be done under CREP, but like planning grants, thermal energy network planning grants, that allow communities to sort of do some initial economic analysis. I'm not sure if it includes like maybe some geotechnical analysis of the subsurface or something, but like to understand like do you have enough load to sort of justify the capital expense of that kind of a system. So I raise it less because I think it's like the be all and end all of solving the state's energy needs, but more just because it's such an area of agreement, at least in my experience.
So I mean, these two bullets. Is this just a different example? I mean, we've got community-based energy solutions. We've got an example of VPP here. We've got it up here, and then this thermal energy planning grant. Is there a way to kind of make more sense out of these two? I stare after.
I would combine them personally, okay. And I want to make sure this sounds good before you do it, Kathy. But
okay.
Well, do whatever. I don't need to tell you. But I think about these as all community-based energy solutions. I think thermal energy and like thermal energy networks, virtual power plants, microgrids, like all are really good examples of that. And this is one where we can say again, like we have a lot of successful pilots, we need to continue to expand on these. And there's a lot of progress to uplift in terms of 2025 implementation on GETs and microgrids. And so we talked about other work at the PUC and BPPs, but it's more to me about differentiating between these community-based solutions and how they complement what I see as the accelerating what's currently development of renewable energy, which I think is more about accelerating development of like large-scale clean energy resources. And we could even put transmission up there, but we have distributed energy there. And maybe again, we end up, I don't know if we should, how much more time we should spend, I guess, on this, because we'll probably end up reordering everything once, you know, we get further along too, but that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I think distributed energy resources kind of falls under that community-based energy solutions, you know, and the other kind of thing that's like very much in the zeitgeist right now is the resilience hubs, and you know, that kind of falls under the microgrid kind of, you know, category, at least in terms of energy. So I think that makes a ton of sense. And I don't know if we have recommendations on each and every one of these things, but you know, this is sort of a pretty comprehensive list.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the other part of the approach was, you know, this meeting, hopefully some brainstorming, pulling out lots of things, and then starting to hone in on what are the things that are going to be ready and for whatever stage in the S curve that you want to go, whether it's a pilot or a ramping strategy. But yeah, this list will, I'm sure, get shorter. So anything else for the good of the order today on all of this? Sorry, trying to get. Okay. Just going to do that before. What? I don't need to do that. Never mind. I'll go back to our agenda. So Jeff shared with you a policy document that has resources with links. We've talked today about some things that are coming out soon. I don't know how well those are captured, Jeff, in the document you've put together. We also got input from the agencies, and so that's another resource. As I mentioned, we'll be hearing from Michael Jung, from the co-chair of the data center committee at our meeting on Friday. I've talked with Commissioner Power about presenting in September on the Power Act and kind of what, you know, where that's at, and how that might tie into other ideas. So we've got other resources that we know will develop, as Jeff said in his policy document. It's a beginning point, and we'll want to add more things in. So if you, Vice Chair, if you can send links to some of the reports that are soon to come out, that would be great. And we can start adding those into our longer list.
By share links, do you mean up to, because the reports aren't out yet?
Yeah, no, I was thinking more if they're like, if there's a landing page for a planning effort, or a report rating effort, then any links to that, or just, you know, if you've got a sentence saying this is the group and this is what they're doing. That'd be great.
Happy to do
that. The other thing we talked about in our transportation committee was, I don't think we want these meetings to be presentation heavy. We don't have enough time in this effort. But if there are key questions that you have for agencies that you think would be important for us to track down, if you could send those to Jeff and I, Jeff and me, then we can kind of organize those, and because we don't want to barrage the agencies with the other agencies with a lot of questions, but we definitely want to get information that we need. So once you've kind of looked at some of the resources, if you haven't already, that Jeff put together, and if you've got specific questions or this discussion has raised questions for you, just send those in to Jeff and me, and we'll kind of collate those and figure out how to get the information that we need. We did have a couple of other agencies join us during the transportation meeting, and we did have a little bit of time at the end of the meeting. We used the last 15 minutes to kind of address some of the questions that came up. So that's something that we can do if we want to, but we really need to kind of try and do as much as we can offline on those kinds of things, because we have precious little time together. Any thoughts about that?
We talked a lot about the PUC today, so I don't know if there's, any, I jokingly put in the chat that we should avoid, recommendations that give the PUC more work, because it seems like they're pretty busy. But the other, for I don't know if this is my bugaboo, but like making it easier, more uniform, faster to permit rooftop solar and battery energy storage, is kind of a building codes division question, and I don't think we often have building codes division coming here. I'm also part of like a coalition called the Zero Coalition, and they're pushing a agenda. The building codes division has a sort of this Byzantine committee structure. I mean, Jeff, you think you have it bad, with us. The poor building codes division has, a subcommittee for like every conceivable aspect of a building, commercial, residential, and everything in between. And it doesn't. It makes sense in a certain way, because you'd think like, well, it's the elevators, we should have the elevator experts, or like, we have HVAC, let's have the HVAC experts or whatever. But I think in what ends up happening in reality is like a few people kind of end up sort of forever being on those committees, even though the committees themselves say like it needs to rotate. And so anyway, it might be interesting just to hear from Building Codes Division about like what challenges they're experiencing, what what barriers, are they looking for at best practices from other states in terms of making it easier to do energy efficiency. It always seems like we're going the opposite way. They've also done some important rule changes recently around air conditioning and mandating heat pumps and all that. So just I don't want to sort of send staff down like some long rabbit hole, but just an idea that maybe Building Codes Division could be something.
They are on the commission. They are represented on the commission, and we certainly could put some deeper agenda items, whether we can do that as part of this process, or we just want to recognize that that's something we should pick up. Vice Chair, it looks like you have some thoughts. You were smiling a lot. No, okay.
I think I was smiling because I was thinking about some of the progress that, or it's been the recent progress this year on the heat pump requirement, more or less, that BCD adopted for new residential buildings as part of the code update. But I do think, it seems like that's maybe more under the cross-cutting report.
Yeah.
jurisdiction. Yeah.
Yeah. The only other thing that came to mind for me, and maybe it's captured under one of these other topics that we talked about, but is, was there anything about energy efficiency? I know there are discussions that have happened as part of the data center group discussions around opportunities for public-private partnerships, or ways that probably a better way to say it, ways that the data centers might help us go farther faster on some energy efficiency. Do folks feel like that's something that's already tucked in someplace, or do we need to call it out too, as at least at this brainstorming phase, as something that we should be thinking about?
I think energy efficiency is always something that's, an important topic for us to maintain. I think what sort of changed, in our thinking around energy efficiency in the past few years, and this is reflected in the Oregon Energy Strategy, is that, in addition to sort of traditional tactics of, building envelope, sort of appliance standards and all that, that electrification in and of itself increases efficiency. And so when we take a fossil fuel combustion device and change it to an electric device, it's going to increase energy efficiency. And that's sort of true at the very, very tiny margin. So you can take a 95% efficient furnace and switch it to electric resistance, and it's going to get a little tiny bit more efficient, but probably costs you a lot more to run. But you can get a heat pump and get vastly more efficient heating. And of course that's true for electric vehicles as well. And so I think that's the one area where maybe that banging that drum and reminding the legislature that when we think about energy efficiency, we have to continue this really important work of trying to bring those services, particularly to low-income Oregonians, who are struggling to pay their bills. But at the same time, we should not lose sight that these new technologies actually offer us an opportunity to really have a step change in what energy efficiency looks like in the state, which is it's a more challenging conversation due to the fact that we have increasing demand, mainly driven by data center growth, but and so there's increasing kind of concerns about reliability, but this is nonetheless remains true.
I would just add, and I put this in the chat earlier, but I think for grid utilization, I think this really fits in terms of the energy bucket, and I think we should just add demand response and flexibility, or maybe the efficiency and demand response. But I do think this intersection is really in terms of addressing barriers to households and small businesses accessing heat pumps and other efficiency upgrades, and what does that mean in terms of benefiting the grid and the transition overall. And that's something we talked about too, and maybe not that intersection, but in wanting to make sure that the cross-cutting, or the report committee was talking about cross-cutting issues, including resilience. I think, again, this is another really important one to talk about, the role of heat pumps and electrification and weatherization in terms of mitigation and adaptation and affordability and resilience, all of the things.
Chair, is OHCS represented on this committee? Because OHCS, of course, administers the weatherization programs, LIHEAP, and the two funds that are provided by the investor-owned utility, or the funds that are provided by the investor-owned utilities.
They are.
Because that's an area, I mean, just for my own personal, Multnomah County, we are the community action partner for Multnomah County, delivering those, LIHEAP services. And I just think that there's, to me, there feels like there's a lot of disconnects in the system. Just as an example, recently we've been trying to provide, better information to our LIHEAP recipients, that they can also sign up. Anybody that comes into the LIHEAP door we should be telling them about the low income rates that are available, right? And that circuit doesn't exist necessarily, right? And maybe, you know, OHCS could just simply say like, you will do this, and then all of a sudden like that circuit, you know, becomes, you know, a KPI or something like that. You know, similarly, recently, you know, with our friends at the city of Portland, we've notified folks at that Heat with Oil, hey, sign up for the Energy Friendly Homes program. Do it now so you don't get crushed this winter, you know, with oil heating, you know, costs. So just this is maybe beyond the scope of today's conversation. Just sort of, you know, as I kind of ramp up my level of comfort and with this committee and knowledge about the committee, then, you know, maybe that's an area of future focus. Thank you.
Great. That sounds good. So we are anticipating some more detailed and discussions, prioritization, fleshing out some kind of subtopics, looking at, you know, existing information and pulling that in. So for example, if there's a great recommendation in the energy strategy that you think we should really kind of get behind, bring those, you know, do your homework and bring ideas that you think should be captured someplace in here. Definitely kind of think this is too long a list, so think through what are the most important things for us to focus our voice on. Jeff, is there something else around homework for the next meeting that you want to flag?
Yeah, just that we'll be sending out an email next week with some specifics for what we're looking for in advance of the next meeting. So the next meeting is August 26th, and we're just going to ask that you kind of jump into the policy recommendations that are already out there, and then look at this list and say, you know, what are the priorities that you think the commission should consider? And if there are gaps, put something forward there. And it could also be a concept if it's something that's not really fully fleshed out or something you don't have the ability to fully draft yet. But I think our goal is to get that information in advance of the second meeting, so we can compile it and kind of work through that list and start getting down to specifics. So
yeah, that was an
forward to that.
important point, Jeff. It's don't just bring them to the meeting, get them to us in advance, and that'll be spelled out in the email that you'll get early next week from, or some point next week from Jeff, so that we can synthesize it as much as possible. And we'll probably have some key questions. For example, you know, what are the most important of all the topics we talked about? What are the ones that are most important, especially for the next session?
This is a great brainstorm.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, is there anything else for the good of the order before we sign off? Thank you for all the good thinking. And again, do feel free. We're anticipating that work's going to happen in between, both all of you individually, but if there are things that you want to clarify for Jeff and me, feel free to send those thoughts in and help us kind of build out information on these different topics. That'll stop sharing.
And Jeff, did you see the list of the links I put in the chat?
I did. I grabbed them already. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Great.
Excellent.
Awesome. All right.
Thank
Thanks.
you all.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Everybody.
Appreciate it. Bye.
Bye.